we've now got our closing keynote with Jane Wurwand, the founder of Dermalogica. And it's a really exciting topic. It's the entrepreneurial mindset and the Great Reset. We're also welcoming back New York Times bestselling author Nicole Lapin. She's going to lead the conversation. Nicole is a superwoman in her own right. She's also a former anchor for CNN, CNBC, and Bloomberg, and the host of daily iHeart radio show, Money Rehab. In this conversation with Nicole, Jane is going to share her founder journey and recent launch of her book, Skin in the Game, with many of her lessons learned along the way. Jane will go beyond business advice to show how you can find your own purpose, why she thinks entrepreneurship and supporting small business is key to achieving financial independence for women and the world, and why now, during the Great Reset, it's the best time to trust your gut and go for it. I always get chills when Jane speaks. I always take away so many great insights. And Nicole, cannot wait to hear some of your questions. Can you just introduce yourself to, I mean, I know the Founder Made community knows you so well now, but if there's anything else you want to add before we move on to Jane, would love to hear it.
From me? No, let's get into it. I love.
All right, I'm going to pop out of here then.
Jane, was there something else you wanted to add? But Julia, you crushed the intro game as usual.
No, right. I thought it was great. Only that my only disability is that I could not load my background to fit in with everyone else. So, typical entrepreneur, I'm flying a little by the seat of my pants here. All good.
You have a great background though.
By the way, it's a miracle that I got mine to work. So normally I'm in the same boat. So, all right. Thank you so much, Julia. Jane, funny story. So here, I don't know, even with the virtual background, you can't really see it, but this is your book, Skin in the Game, of course. It has all sorts of little sticky notes like throughout the entire thing. I think I used an entire thing of sticky notes. Fun story. I actually have the same publisher you have, Harper Leadership, for my fourth book that's coming out in February. And I asked them because, as you know now as the author, you get these like covers before the book gets printed. So I said, which book fits my cover? And they said, your book. So I bought a whole bunch of copies. And every time we do a photo shoot, I don't know if you can see all of these, inside is your book. So I've given it to celebrities and done all sorts of things. So this has been around since it came out last month, right?
Yeah.
So it's such a good book. And I will tell you, I am really tough on business books, as you know.
But I know you are.
So chock full of everything, like the most inspiring quotes that are not, cliche, photos of you and Raymond, connect the dots things, like all sorts of really, really fun, interesting things, the way it's laid out. I want to ask you about the different rooms that you talk about in the book. I think it's a great analogy. I'm probably going to forget one, but the bravery room, the why room, the invisible room, the empathy room, the next room, lots of rooms, the hidden room. How did you come up with this analogy? And what do you think people should know when they're thinking of their own rooms?
I came up with the analogy, and I mentioned this in the book. I listened to a lecture by Dr. Christiane Northrup some years ago, who's a women's health and reproductive specialist. And she happened to use this analogy of thinking of your life like a house that you're walking through the rooms. And it just stuck with me. And when I was thinking about the layout of the book, because I've never, unlike you, who are a prolific, fabulous, best-selling author, I've never written a book. So I thought, how do I lay this out? Do I lay it out chronologically? But that didn't really make sense because I was trying to weave in a memoir and also what is an entrepreneurial mindset, along with making it sort of, useful to have, and some sort of life hacks and parenting hacks and all the rest of it. So to lay it out chronologically didn't really make sense because, you get insights much later in your life where you realize you learned that a long time ago, but it didn't click, it didn't register, you didn't use it. So I kind of laid it out rather like the house analogy of when you walk through a house. Let's say you've lost something, you've lost a pair of glasses, which is very typical for me. You walk through every room looking for something that you lost, and you've got to hunt everywhere and don't miss anything. And so I laid it out as a journey through these rooms and what we learn about bravery, what we learn about empathy, and how do we learn it. And it's not typically from any other place than experience. And how do you don't just say I'm brave, because most of us are scared to death. And bravery isn't about not being scared. Bravery is about being able to function when you're absolutely terrified, which is critical as an entrepreneur or a founder, because you won't have all the information all the time. And if you're doing something which no one else has done, perhaps, there's no one to even model yourself on. So other than being incredibly arrogant and sort of narcissistic, unless you have that, you really will feel out of your depth. And some people call that imposter syndrome. I think it's just the human condition. I think we really doubt ourselves much more than we should. And the way we get over that is just by pushing through and speaking our truth, even though our knees and our voice are shaking.
Yeah, it's the mean girl, I like to call her, inside my head. I need her to take several seats. But the empathy room that you mentioned, it was an awesome part of the book. And I also love how you talk about your blunders or the mistakes that you've made and how other entrepreneurs can learn from them. Do you mind sharing the empathy blunder? Because I think that a lot of the founder made community is dealing with packaging and other things. And so you were talking with a colleague and you saw packaging that you didn't love so much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're making me relive it, which is absolutely right. You have to go
Sorry
back.
about that.
No. Listen, we all make blunders every single day, and we're what I call in the book perfectly imperfect. You can't aim for perfection, but I think it's so important to come from a place of kindness and empathy. Even the hardest message, even, and I talk in the book, as you know, about letting someone go. How do you do that with kindness and empathy, and not that they feel crushed or in any way less than? We just don't have, I don't believe we have the right to do that. And I think when people do that, it represents their own insecurity. So anyway, I say all that because I was in a meeting, and it was a pretty informal meeting, and someone had brought in some packaging and left it out on the table for us to all discuss, I guess, or look at or review. It was just like a monthly review of what had happened in the last month. And I looked at it, I picked it up, and I just said, oh my goodness, don't tell me this has been approved. I mean, it's so
Bloody.
so ugly. It's so bloody
Ugly. I think you said.
Please don't tell me this has been approved with marketing materials. And it was for our professional line of products, which isn't seen by the consumer, but it is seen by the professional skin therapist, because they use it in the salon. And our VP of marketing, who'd been with us a long time and worked very closely with me and was absolutely brilliant, Matthew Devaris. Matthew said to me, well, some people think it's great, and think they like it. And I'm like, really? I find that shocking. And he kind of shrugged and walked out. And I realized I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good inside. And I thought, that was kind of mean. Actually, no, that was rude. And I had to be very honest with myself and say, I felt like I was kind of playing to the gallery a little bit, because there were other people in the room. And so I was sort of like, as a founder, you have to be so careful, because when you make an offhand comment, it's coming from you, and therefore it carries more weight than it probably should. And so I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, I need to go and apologize to Matthew. That wasn't my best self. So I went to find him in his office. He wasn't there. I felt bad. I thought, shall I leave a note? And I thought, no, I need to say this in person. And so I found him a bit later, and I said to him, Matthew, I wanted to talk to you about what I said earlier. And it wasn't my best self. And I don't feel good about it. And I don't change my mind about how I feel about the packaging. However, it was incredibly rude and insensitive of me to say it in that way. I'm better than that. And he accepted my apology. And, thank goodness he had worked with me for like 20 years by that time. I think he was fully aware of it. But it wasn't my best self. So I talk about this idea of having empathy, not just for other people that you might think are less fortunate than you, but for people that are not less fortunate, but you just were not your best self. And learn to apologize, do it well, and do it often, because you'll probably need to.
And rinse and repeat, right? You've built this amazing company and empire around this idea, though, of propping other people up. So this is one small story in this world where you really, I found so striking, built this business by making the salon therapist successful in their business.
Yes.
Can you talk to me more about building this great team? It's often been said that if you want to build a great team, it's not about telling people how great you are, but how great they are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're all great at something. It's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart. So your creative people, they don't need to be able to necessarily, do an accounting program. And the people in your finance department don't have to know how to design a packaging piece. It's all, we're collaborative. From the janitorial staff in our buildings all the way through to the CEO, we've all got a role to play, and every single one, you may not think it has as much importance on the end business, but it is critically important in the business being successful. So I think that's really a core to everything. And sorry, I lost my thread. What did you ask?
No, it was so with the big ad campaign that they're not beauticians and that you're really empowering the salon owners themselves. Yeah.
So we always, thank you. So we always remembered that our end consumer was indeed the customer, the client that was going to buy the product in a salon. But that recommendation of the product came from the professional skin therapist who bought the line, carried the product, endorsed the product. And by doing so, they were really putting their own reputation on the line, along with the reputation of our brand. So I would never forget that the professional skin therapists are the people that brought us to the party. And if they were not successful, we were not successful. And so we saw that skin therapist as our immediate consumer. And so everything we did had to make them successful. If it was a product, could they stand behind it? Was the name a gimmick or the product a gimmick? That was going to destroy their reputation and credibility. We couldn't do it. We couldn't come out with magic kind of boob lifters or wrinkle removers. Not that we would have done, but had we even risked it because we thought, oh, we could make a few dollars quickly because our reputation's good, we would have thrown our credibility under the bus. It wasn't who our brand was. But more importantly, we would have been asking them to risk their credibility to endorse it and carry it. And that's just too high a price for anyone to pay. And we built this team spirit, this collaboration around supporting professional skin therapists and always telling them that without them, we were not successful, and not forgetting that. Because it's really easy when you get some success to think that you're all that. And people will tell you are, and you can't fall in love with your own publicity because, you actually probably wrote most of it yourself or someone on your team did, right? So don't get carried away with all that. Keep focused on your North Star and don't compromise that value, because a successful founder, I believe, is about a value-driven proposition, a higher why, a bigger purpose. And I don't say that lightly, and it doesn't have to be incredibly, world changing, but it has to be something that makes a difference in other people's lives. And for us, that was financial independence, particularly for underserved entrepreneurs who typically are end of the line to get funding, which is women particularly of color, and underserved communities that, typically fund their own business on 3 credit cards for $28,000, which I've been told by people in the financial world, that is ridiculous. That does not happen. It does happen. And it happens to the high street entrepreneur, whether it's the salon, the florist, the dog groomer, all those local entrepreneurs that we rely on to build our community and our glue are all self-funding typically. They don't get first round funding. They wouldn't even know what that was if you said it. And so we need to make sure that we support them as customers, and for us at Dermalogica as businesses.
And you're putting your money where your mouth is. So the foundation you started is found to support small business women, entrepreneurs, and all of the proceeds of your book go to that.
Thank you.
Why was that important to you?
Well, really important. I mean, I wanted to make sure that the legacy of my story went down in writing, but also that the legacy of why we did this work, why our brand was founded went in some concrete way as well. So all proceeds globally from the book will go to support local entrepreneurs. And our nonprofit that we started in the Wurwand Foundation is called Found. And you can actually go online, look it up, look at the work we do. It says foundla.org. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3. And it's a great resource for small entrepreneurs. So anyone listening, a founder or an entrepreneur, please go there. It's a great resource of funding, of coaching, mentorship, and most importantly, connection to other small entrepreneurs, because these are bricks and mortar entrepreneurs who need each other. And by connecting them to each other, it's actually as important as, us spouting off any kind of words of wisdom about what we think they should be doing. Because when they talk to a fellow entrepreneur in a similar size community with the same sort of business, they're getting a lot more concrete best practices. And so we built our nonprofit and our initiative Found the same way that we built Dermalogica, by really focusing on how what we did could make someone else successful.
Because you talk about not only the epidemic of funding issues, but the epidemic of loneliness, particularly around female entrepreneurs. Do you think this started before the pandemic and was just exacerbated, or was it just the light was shined on it now that we've all been pivoting and working from home and everything else?
Yeah, I think the light was shone on it because I believe that our communities, and have done for a long time, I think we're in an epidemic of loneliness. And, if we became very sort of philosophical and look back a long way, we probably look at, the fact that we're traveling more, we move away from our families, our loved ones, our closest people perhaps, and maybe we move countries from them. So there's all kinds of reasons why this happens. In entrepreneurship, women get the smallest amount of funding, less than 4% of all funding. I'm not just talking about private equity or VC funding. I'm talking of any traditional funding model, less than 4%. The numbers are not changing. If you're a woman of color, it's less than 1%. Now, the result of that is you end up self-funding or funding from family and friends. And you typically employ yourself and maybe, someone that you don't have to pay, a huge amount of money to, because you don't have a lot of salary with. So many small entrepreneurs, small businesses, local entrepreneurs are women who are working on their own. In fact, the statistic is that over 96% of women-owned businesses only ever employ that one woman, which is kind of shocking. There are more companies run by men named John than there are women in any of the ownership of businesses that they have had funding for. So all these statistics, make us kind of shocked, but that's it. So as a consequence, there's this huge amount of loneliness, the loneliness of the invisible entrepreneur. And those entrepreneurs need to be seen and found, because they are actually the people that we relied on, especially in the pandemic, for our local community businesses, our local restaurants, our local coffee shops, our local bakeries, of course, the salon, I'm familiar with that piece, but all your high street, our high streets and our main streets are all made up of those businesses. They create more jobs. 50%, just over 50% of all jobs in America are with one of those local entrepreneurs. And most of us, including myself, got our very first job in a local business because they would hire us. Maybe, my job was working Saturdays in a hair salon. So I think it's really important to consider that idea of loneliness for them. And then for women, especially during the pandemic, there's this big conversation now about the Great Resignation, that people are not coming back to the workplace. And why are they not coming back? And we keep hearing, well, because we don't have childcare. And that's true, but it's certainly not the only reason. And I know from, working with local entrepreneurs and working in an industry of women, we've been unhappy with the status quo for a long time. We're trying to juggle a lot of business stress and work with home work. And we never gave up all the work we had in the home and the responsibilities in the home when we started our businesses. Society expected us to do all of it. So here we are, and everyone, the fact is women bear the brunt of whether it's childcare or household management or grocery shopping. I'm not saying they do everything, but we bear the brunt of it. And especially, of course, if you're a single parent. So with that epidemic of loneliness, we've been looking for flexibility in our lives for a long time. And we are not going to go back to whatever people say the new normal. It's not, it's the new next. And the new next is quite honestly an industrial revolution, which is happening. And we want to be connected to each other in a way that allows us to experience the human condition. We want to spend time with our friends and family. We want to reconnect on human connection. And I know you know this, Nicole, because we've talked about it before. Our industry, the salon industry, we literally touch people. That's our career. And when you touch somebody, this is not about pampering or luxury or some kind of indulgent vanity. This is about human connection. That's why people come back to a salon. That's why people go to nail technicians who are busy because there are other people around. That's why we go to a coffee shop and open up our laptop and work there. It's not because we don't have electricity at home, although it might be because we don't have, we don't have quality time to concentrate at home because we've got everyone else at home. But all of this adds up to the fact that the human connectivity is as important as our technological connectivity. And it's for that reason that I feel one of the big pieces of this industrial revolution are going to be any business which connects people to each other is absolutely going to see, we're seeing it in our own growth. We had a double-digit growth during the pandemic over 2019 numbers, which was unexpected. And the segment of our market that did incredibly well because they reached out to their customers because they knew them. This was not a transactional relationship with the individual salons. They reached out to their clients because they know them. This was not a transactional sale on a digital platform. This was knowing a person and keeping connected to them. And we're now seeing that huge lift in services and human connection.
Yeah, it's needed now more than ever before, of course, the connection and the experience. This new next that you talk about, do you think it's better or worse or different than the new normal? And can you tell us about the buggy whip and the car quote that I'll butcher?
Yeah, that was on our pre-call, which was so funny. But anyway, it's always good.
A great one. Yeah.
We're definitely not going into a new normal. Everything has changed. And as an entrepreneur, we know that the mindset of an entrepreneur is dare, risk, and grow. You don't know what you're doing until the first time you do it. So we all had to figure out, Zoom, or we all had to figure out a digital platform for our product. We all had to figure out how we're going to tackle the Chinese market if you're at that size. We all had to figure out how we're just going to keep the door open on our business. So at whatever level, we've had to do a lot of juggling and figuring stuff out that we didn't know how to do. And the best way to do it is trial and error. We all know that. And so when we look to this, I call it the Great Reset, because think about it, we're in a revolution of everything. We're in a political revolution globally. I just got back from London and I saw the same kind of things, the big waves, not the little ripples, but the big waves. So they're the same as we're experiencing here. We're in a political revolution. We're in a climate revolution. We're in a youth revolution, because we've got digital natives now who are coming into our companies and running our companies as well. We're in a gender revolution. We've never had the conversation around gender and the spectrum of it that we are now, and it needs to happen. We're in a revolution politically. We're in a medical revolution. We're in an education revolution. So there are going to be people that say, well, I don't want to change. I want to keep doing what I'm doing because it's worked. If it worked for me before, why won't it work for me now? Well, here's the thing. When Henry Ford invented the motor car, I'm sure there were people that said, I'm not giving up my buggy whip. Well, okay, that's good. You do you, that's great. But if someone had said, if Henry Ford had asked a focus group, what do you need? They would have said a faster horse. They would not have said a motor car because no one had thought of it as being a practical application for human transport. And now we're saying, we're ready to give up, I think, gasoline or fossil fuel driven cars. What's the next? And so, nothing is going back. It can't, it never does. So we have to say, either you're hanging on to your buggy whip for dear life, or we're saying, I'm going to get one of those newfangled machines. And whatever that will be, and fill in the blank. It was a car 100 years ago. It's whatever it is today, and that will change tomorrow because the pace and rapidity of innovation is happening so startlingly quickly, which is fantastic. So Entrepreneurs love this kind of climate. It's a mindset of change, embrace it. And when I look at the book, I wrote it during COVID, and I didn't expect it to actually be so focused on this idea of change and how do you embrace it and how do you gear yourself up for it and how do you go forward paralyzed with fear, not knowing what you're doing and still making sure it turns out okay. And yet that's what happened. And that's what's resonated in the book much more than I expected it to, because I didn't know this is where we were going to be.
And it's very meta that it came out talking about the entrepreneurial mindset and this idea of adapting to change while you're doing a virtual book tour.
Yes, I did a virtual book tour, which is so great. I've never done a real one. You have, so I don't know how it compares. But all I can say is it's ever so nice to sit, with pajamas on the bottom, and something looking quite decent on the top. So I thought it was great. And the great thing about a virtual book tour was I was able to visit 12 countries in one day. It was fantastic. I mean, I was talking to Europe in the morning and I was talking to Australia in the afternoon, and I'm based in Los Angeles. So that would never have been possible. So we've taken we've seized the moment and said, we've just got to, I don't know how far we could go with virtual. I don't think there's a limit. And so it's revolutionized at Dermalogica. It's revolutionized our education, of course, our sales, but also our internal training programs. It's been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to doing lots more. So it's different.
Yes, and so am I. I mean, run, don't walk to get this, everyone. It's terrific. It's so many great nuggets, and obviously the proceeds go to Found, so everybody wins here. When you sold the book, I'm assuming it was pre-COVID, so you had to pivot as you were going?
Yeah. So what happened was, I tell this story in detail in the book, but how do you find an agent? How do you find a publisher? All these challenges. It's none of it's easy, and you have to do it. So you do it. I wrote 2 versions of completely different books before I decided this was the heat of my message. And I now look back and realize, of course, that was because there was a timing thing happening, I believe, in the universe. I believe in magical thinking. So the book had to wait till now to be born, if that's the right thing. But I had the negotiations with HarperCollins in December of 2019. We had a contract in January of 2020, and they gave me till September of 2020 to write it. And I thought, oh my God, I hope I can. First of all, I don't know how to write a book. Secondly, I've got a travel schedule that's so busy. I don't know how I'm going to find the time. And of course, as we all know now, we went into a lockdown in March 16th in California, in Los Angeles. And I thought, okay, well, if I've got 6 weeks, I shall try and bang out as much as I can. Little did I realize I was going to have a couple of years. But I turned in that manuscript in September of 2020. And it takes, as you know, Nicole, a while to get everything lined up with publishing and printing, and then the supply chain issues, etc. And the book launched in October in the States. It launched November in the UK, and December, this week, in fact, in Australia, South Africa, and the rest of the world. So the timing worked really well. So I was grateful.
Congratulations. And yes, the birth analogy is great. I talk about it a lot. Like I've not birthed humans, but now 4 books, and I'll have 6 more after that.
It's painful. It's as
with
painful.
no epidural, right?
Yes.
My girlfriends who have birthed both are like, the book was more painful and there were no drugs involved.
No drugs. And no doula. No one helping. You deliver this thing. Yeah, exactly.
So what would you tell other entrepreneurs? Because you probably hear it, I hear it, that everybody has a book in them, right? And they think they're going to do this as a side hustle.
Yeah.
Is that what would you say to that?
My advice is go for it. You've got it. You don't know how to do it, but you do know how to do some stuff. So figure out whatever you learned how to build a business or become a founder or hire a person. Use all those skills you already have inside you. Everything you have is already inside you. The thing you think is your greatest weakness is actually also your greatest strength. Just reconfigure it. Steve Jobs dropped out of college and went and studied calligraphy. And he didn't know how that was ever going to help him in anything he was going to do, but he liked, calligraphy and fonts. And it did come into play when he launched Apple and the first Apple computer, because it had the ability to use fonts, which the IBM and competitors didn't have. You never know how the dots are going to join up. Start making your mark, start writing down random ideas, dreamscape them on a board, write down your thoughts, write down colors you like, write down random thoughts. I talk in the book about nothing is random. Your brain might feel hectic, but it's all like a Rolodex. You can figure it out. And then it'll start to emerge. The form will emerge like a dot-to-dot puzzle. Start joining up those dots, and ultimately the form will emerge of what it is.
The zebra.
It's a zebra. Until I joined up the stripes.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily know how those puzzle pieces are going to go when you're in the thick of it, only once you get that perspective. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to start as a poetry major, so I became a writer, just not the kind I expected, for sure. Oh, there's Julia. Well, I could ask you a zillion other things, but you have been so gracious with your time and your wisdom. Thank you, Jane.
No, thank you. And thank you so much for your enjoyment of the book, and good luck with all of your next 6.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Please run, don't walk to get skin in the game, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole.